Captain Lee Jun stood alone on the observation deck of the UES Defiance. The stars stretched out before him, cold and distant, much like humanity's chances of survival. He pressed his hand against the cool glass. This view had once filled him with wonder. Now it only reminded him of all they had lost. "Captain," a voice called from behind him, "you should get some rest." Lee turned to see Kim Hana, his communications officer. Dark circles under her eyes told him she hadn't followed her own advice. "The Caraxians don't rest," Lee said. "Why should I?" Hana stepped closer. "Because we need you at your best. It's been 3 days since you last slept." Lee nodded but made no move to leave. The weight of command had never felt heavier. 6 months of running battles. 6 months of watching good ships and better people die. 6 months of retreat after retreat. "Any word from Earth Command?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "Nothing new," Hana said. "Same orders as before. Hold position and wait for backup." Lee laughed without humor. "Backup, that will never come." The Defiance was the last human warship in this sector. Once part of a proud fleet of 30 vessels, now they floated alone in the darkness. Earth Command kept promising reinforcements, but Lee knew the truth. There were no ships to spare. "Sir," Hana said softly, "the crew is asking questions. They need to hear something from you." Lee turned from the stars. "Tell them I'll address everyone at 0800. After Hana left, Lee made his way to the tactical room. The ship was quiet during night shift, only skeleton crew manning essential stations. The tactical room was empty except for Park Day, his second-in-command. "You should be sleeping," Lee said. Park looked up from the holographic display. "So should you." The display showed the current positions of the Caraxian fleet. 12 warships, each more powerful than the Defiance. They had been shadowing the human vessel for days, seemingly content to let Lee and his crew sweat. "They're playing with us," Lee said, pointing at the enemy formation. "Like a cat with a mouse." Park nodded. "The question is, why haven't they attacked yet?" "They want something," Lee said. He studied the perfect arrangement of the Caraxian ships. Their formations are always so precise, so mathematical. "That's their strength," Park said, "and their weakness." Lee looked at his friend. "What do you mean?" "The Caraxians follow their battle doctrine to the letter. Every maneuver, every attack pattern, it's all calculated in advance, no room for creativity." Lee considered this. The Caraxians had superior technology and numbers, but Park was right. They fought like machines, not people. An idea began to form in Lee's mind. A desperate, probably suicidal idea. "Show me the specs on my fighter again," he said. Park pulled up the schematics for Lee's TF-117 Wasp fighter. "You're not thinking of going out there alone, are you?" "Not yet," Lee said, "but I want to be ready when the time comes." The fighter was standard issue except for one detail. 3 months ago, during a supply stop at Outpost 7, the Defiance's chief engineer had installed an experimental propulsion system. The higher-ups would have court-martialed them all if they knew, but desperate times called for desperate measures. "Has anyone tested the limit on those micro-jumps?" Lee asked. Park shook his head. "The system's not designed for combat. It's unstable. One wrong calculation and you'll tear yourself apart." "But theoretically," Lee pressed, "could it create a quantum echo effect?" Park's eyes widened. "That's just a theory. No one's ever—" The ship's alarms cut him off. Red lights flashed as the tactical display updated. "The Caraxian fleet is moving," Park said. "They're taking up attack positions." Lee rushed to the bridge, Park close behind. The night crew was already at battle stations when they arrived. "Report," Lee ordered. "Caraxian vessels are powering weapons," the tactical officer said. "All 12 ships are moving to surround us." "Shields up," Lee commanded. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers." The main screen showed the enemy ships closing in. Their sleek, predatory designs made the Defiance look like ancient technology in comparison. "Sir?" Hana called from her station. "We're being hailed." Lee straightened his uniform. On screen. The face that appeared was not what most humans expected the first time they saw a Caraxian. Admiral Traz looked almost gentle, with smooth blue-gray skin and large, thoughtful eyes. But Lee knew better. He had seen the aftermath of Caraxian attacks. "Captain Lee," Traz said, his voice unnaturally smooth, "it seems your long journey ends here." "We still have a few tricks left," Lee replied. Traz's mouth curved in what might have been a smile. "Your species' optimism is fascinating. Perhaps that's why we've studied you for so long before deciding on extinction." The casual way he mentioned wiping out humanity made Lee's blood boil, but he kept his face neutral. "If you're so superior," Lee said, "why talk? Why not just attack?" "Courtesy," Traz replied. "And curiosity. I wonder what you would offer to save your crew." "Nothing," Lee said immediately. "Because any promise you make would be worthless." For the first time, Traz looked annoyed. "Your ship is outdated. Your weapons are ineffective against our shields. Your death is certain." "Then we'll die fighting," Lee said. "It's what humans do." He signaled Hana to cut the transmission. The bridge was silent. Every crew member looked to Lee, waiting for orders, for hope, for something. "They'll attack in precisely 7 minutes," Lee said. "That's their standard procedure after a final communication." "How can you be sure?" someone asked. "Because they're predictable," Lee replied. "They follow patterns. They calculate everything." He turned to Park. "And that's how we'll beat them." Park looked doubtful. "Sir, with all due respect—" "Prepare my fighter," Lee interrupted. "I'm going out." The crew stared in disbelief. "Captain," Park said, "that's suicide. 1 fighter against 12 warships?" Lee smiled for the first time in days. "Not suicide, science. They think they know all the rules of space combat, but they've never seen what I'm about to do." He turned to the crew. "Hold the Defiance here. Don't retreat no matter what happens. Wait for my signal." "What signal?" Hana asked. "You'll know it when you see it," Lee said, already moving toward the lift that would take him to the hangar deck. As the doors closed, he heard Park take command. Good man. If this didn't work, at least the crew would be in capable hands. In the hangar, Lee suited up quickly. The flight crew looked at him with a mixture of awe and concern. "Make sure the experimental drive is online," he told the chief mechanic. "It's ready, sir," the mechanic said. "But it hasn't been properly tested. The stress could tear the fighter apart." "Today's as good a day for testing as any," Lee said, climbing into the cockpit. As the hangar doors opened to the darkness of space, Lee took one last look at the inside of the Defiance, his home for the past 2 years. Maybe the last human space he would ever see. "Launch," he ordered. The Wasp shot from the hangar into open space, and the fight for humanity's survival began. The TF-117 Wasp fighter shot into the darkness of space. Captain Lee Jun felt the familiar push against his seat as the engines kicked in. Ahead of him, the Caraxian fleet hung against the stars like deadly jewels. "Captain, this is insane." Park's voice crackled through the comm. "Please return to the ship." Lee adjusted his flight path. "Too late for that, Commander. Just be ready when I give the signal." He cut the communication. He needed complete focus now. The 12 Caraxian ships began to move, forming their attack pattern. Lee had studied every Caraxian battle over the past 6 months. He knew their movements, their timing, their weaknesses. The lead Caraxian ship, Admiral Traz's flagship, fired a warning shot. A bright beam of energy passed just meters from Lee's fighter. "So predictable," Lee muttered. On the bridge of the Defiance, the crew watched their captain's small fighter move toward the enemy fleet. "He's going to get himself killed," someone whispered. Hana looked at Park. "What's he planning?" Park stared at the tactical display. "I think I know, but it's never been done before, not in combat." The experimental propulsion system on Lee's fighter wasn't just for speed. In theory, it could create micro-jumps in space, tiny leaps through the fabric of reality itself. But the calculations had to be perfect. One mistake, and the pilot would be torn apart. He's going to try to create a quantum echo, Park said quietly. Hana's eyes widened. That's just a theory, not anymore, Park replied, pointing at the screen. Out in space, Lee's fingers flew over the controls. He had spent countless nights working out the mathematics, plotting each micro-jump. Now it was time to see if theory matched reality. Initiating. Sequence, he said to himself. He pressed the activation switch. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the fighter shuddered. Lee felt a strange sensation, as if his body was stretching in all directions at once. The Coraxian ships fired. Multiple energy beams converged on Lee's position, but he wasn't there anymore. The Wasp seemed to blur, splitting into multiple ghost images that flickered in and out of existence. On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Traz leaned forward. "What is this?" he demanded. "Where did he go?" His weapons officer looked confused. "Sir, he's everywhere. Our targeting systems can't lock on." Traz slammed his fist down. "Impossible, fire again." The Coraxian ships unleashed another volley. Energy beams crisscrossed the space where Lee's fighter had been, but hit nothing. Inside the Wasp, Lee gritted his teeth against the strain. Each micro-jump sent a jolt of pain through his body. The fighter's metal frame groaned under the stress. But it was working. The fighter was jumping between points in space faster than the Coraxian targeting systems could track. To their sensors, it appeared as if there were multiple fighters, a quantum echo effect. Lee pushed forward, guiding his seemingly multiplied fighter straight toward the heart of the Coraxian formation. On the Defiance, the crew watched in amazement. "He's doing it," Park whispered. "He's actually doing it." The tactical display showed Lee's fighter as a blur of overlapping signatures, confusing their own sensors. But the effect on the Coraxian fleet was clear. Their perfect formation was breaking apart as ships tried to track the Phantom fighter. "Look," Hana pointed. 2 Coraxian ships had moved too close to each other, their weapons still firing wildly. A beam meant for Lee struck one of their own vessels instead. Park smiled grimly. That's just the beginning. Lee had planned each micro-jump to draw Coraxian, fire in specific directions. He wasn't just avoiding their weapons, he was making them hit each other. Another Coraxian ship took friendly fire, its shields flaring bright blue before failing. A third ship veered sharply to avoid collision, disrupting the entire fleet's carefully calculated positions. Admiral Traz watched his perfect formation crumble. "How is he doing this?" Traz demanded. "1 human and 1 obsolete fighter." His tactical officer looked pale. "Sir, he's somehow manipulating local space-time. Our systems are designed to track objects moving through normal space." "Then adapt," Traz shouted. "He is just 1 human." But the Coraxian systems couldn't adapt quickly enough. Their battle computers relied on the known laws of physics and movement. What Lee was doing rewrote those laws. Inside the Wasp, warning. Lights flashed across the control panel. The experimental drive was overheating. Each micro-jump put more strain on the system. "Just a little longer," Lee muttered, sweat dripping down his face. He guided the fighter in a complex pattern, dancing between the increasingly chaotic Coraxian ships. Each jump was precisely calculated to bring him closer to his goal, Traz's flagship. On the Defiance, Park noticed something unusual. "He's not just evading," Park said suddenly. "Look at the data stream." Hana checked her console. "He's sending us information with each jump, huge amounts of it." Park's eyes widened in understanding. "He's mapping their entire weapons grid. Every time they fire and miss, he's collecting data on their tracking systems, their shield frequencies, everything." The crew realized what their captain was doing. This wasn't a suicide mission. It was the most dangerous reconnaissance operation ever attempted. Lee's fighter screamed past another Coraxian ship, so close that the enemy vessel's crew could see the human craft through their viewports. But when they fired, they hit only empty space and another Coraxian ship beyond. With each passing minute, more data streamed back to the Defiance. Park and the tactical team worked frantically to process it all. "He's found a pattern in their shield harmonics," one officer reported. "There's a pulse frequency that synchronizes across all their ships." And a targeting blind spot, another added. Their systems can't track anything moving in this specific pattern. Park looked at the tactical display where 4 Coraxian ships were now damaged from friendly fire. He's not trying to destroy them himself. He's giving us the tools to do it. Inside the Wasp, Lee was running out of time. The experimental drive whined dangerously. The control panel was a sea of red warning lights. "One more pass," he said through gritted teeth. He aimed directly for Traz's flagship, his fighter appearing to multiply into dozens of ghost images as he executed the final sequence of jumps. Admiral Traz watched in disbelief as the human fighter seemed to dissolve into a cloud of phantom vessels all converging on his ship. "Evasive action," he ordered, but it was too late, not because Lee's fighter was about to strike, but because the Defiance had what it needed. "Captain," Park's voice came through the comm. "We have the data, complete data. Return to the ship now." Lee pulled away from the Coraxian flagship, his fighter straining under the final micro-jumps. The experimental drive gave a final shriek of protest before shutting down. As he guided the Wasp back toward the Defiance on conventional engines, Lee looked over his shoulder at the disorganized Coraxian fleet. Their perfect formation was in shambles. 2 ships drifted with obvious damage. Others were still firing randomly at ghost images that no longer existed. For the first time in 6 months, humanity had a chance. Lee felt a smile spread across his face. "Let's show them what humans can do," he said as the Defiance opened its hangar doors to welcome him home. Behind him, the confused Coraxian fleet regrouped, unaware that the real battle was just about to begin. The hangar deck erupted in cheers as Lee climbed out of his fighter. Engineers rushed forward to examine the experimental drive, which smoked and hissed from the strain of the micro-jumps. "Captain," Park pushed through the crowd. "That was the most reckless, dangerous, and successful," Lee cut in with a tired smile. "Did you get the data?" Park nodded. "We got it all. The tactical team is working on it now." Lee's legs buckled suddenly. The strain of the micro-jumps had taken more from him than he realized. Park caught him before he fell. "Get the doctor," Park called to a nearby crew member. "No time," Lee said, straightening. "The Coraxians will regroup soon. Take me to the bridge." On the bridge, the tactical team worked frantically to process the flood of data from Lee's mission. Screens displayed complex patterns of Coraxian shield frequencies and weapon systems. "What do we have?" Lee asked as he entered, leaning slightly on Park for support. Hannah looked up from her station. "Captain, what you did out there, it was amazing." Lee waved away the praise. "Just tell me we got something useful." The tactical officer, a young man named Kang, stepped forward. "Sir, we've got everything. Their shield harmonics, weapon cycling patterns, blind spots in their targeting systems. It's all here." Lee moved to the main display. "Show me." Kang pulled up a diagram of a Coraxian warship. Their shields operate on a synchronized frequency across their entire fleet. Every ship's shields pulse at exactly the same rate. "That's efficient," Park noted, "and vulnerable," Lee added. "If we can disrupt one, we disrupt them all." Kang nodded. "Exactly, and there's more." He highlighted the weapons systems. Their targeting computers all use the same predictive algorithm. They're designed to calculate where a target will be, not where it is. "Which is why they couldn't hit me when I was using the micro-jumps," Lee said. "They couldn't predict my position." "And there's one more thing," Kang said, excitement in his voice. "Something big." The display zoomed in on what looked like a central power node in the Coraxian ship design. They use a quantum entanglement system to coordinate their fleet movements. That's why their formations are always so perfect. Every ship knows exactly what the others are doing instantly. Lee studied the display. "Can we disrupt it?" "Better," Kang replied. "We can feed false data into it." A plan began to form in Lee's mind. "So we could make their ships think the others are in different positions than they actually are?" Causing confusion and possibly collisions, Park finished. "It's brilliant," Hannah called from her station. "Captain, the Coraxian fleet is reforming. They'll be in attack position in 10 minutes. Lee straightened, pushing aside his exhaustion. All right, here's what we're going to do. On the Caraxian flagship, Admiral Traz watched the tactical display with cold fury. His perfect formation had been disrupted by a single human fighter. Report, he demanded. His science officer approached cautiously. Admiral, our analysis of the humans' maneuvers is complete, and he somehow created a quantum echo effect, appearing in multiple locations simultaneously. Traz's eyes narrowed. That's theoretically impossible in a combat situation. Yes, sir. The calculations required would be... Are you suggesting a human outdid our best scientists? Traz cut in dangerously. The science officer hesitated. The evidence suggests that is exactly what happened. Traz turned back to the display. The human ship Defiance remained in position, making no attempt to escape. That worried him. They're planning something, he said. Prepare all ships for attack. No communication with the humans this time. Destroy them immediately. As the Caraxian fleet moved forward, perfectly aligned once more, an alert sounded. Admiral, his tactical officer called. The human ship is powering weapons. Traz almost laughed. Let them. Their weapons cannot penetrate our shields. On the Defiance, Lee gave the order. Target the lead Caraxian ship. Use the exact frequencies Kang identified. Fire when ready. The Defiance's main cannons fired. Energy beams lanced out, striking the lead Caraxian ship. Its shields flared and failed completely. On the Caraxian bridge, Traz was thrown to the floor as his ship shuddered. Impossible, he shouted. How did they penetrate our shields? Unknown, Admiral, his tactical officer responded, panic in his voice. They're targeting our shield generators with incredible precision. The Defiance fired again. Another direct hit. Traz scrambled to his feet. Return fire. All ships, concentrate on the human vessel. The Caraxian fleet opened fire, a massive volley of energy beams converging on the Defiance. On the human ship, Lee remained calm. Evasive pattern Alpha, just like we practiced. The Defiance moved in a pattern based on Lee's fighter maneuvers. Not quite the quantum echo effect, but enough to confuse the Caraxian targeting systems. Most of the enemy fire missed. The few shots that connected struck the Defiance's shields, which held. Shields at 82%, reported the defensive systems. Officer. Not bad, Lee said with a small smile. Now let's implement Phase 2. Park looked up from his station. Quantum disruptor ready, sir. Lee nodded. Activate it. The Defiance released a carefully calibrated pulse, designed to interfere with the Caraxians' quantum entanglement communications. On the Caraxian ships, chaos erupted. Suddenly, their tactical displays showed fleet members in positions where they weren't actually located. Two Caraxian ships, believing they had clear paths, accelerated directly toward each other. Collision alert, shouted Traz's tactical officer. Traz watched in horror as two of his destroyers crashed into each other, their shields failing as they tore into each other's hulls. What is happening? He demanded. His science officer stared at the readings in disbelief. They've somehow infiltrated our quantum entanglement network. Our ships are receiving false positional data. For the first time in his career, Traz felt fear. This wasn't just a lucky shot by the humans. This was a fundamental understanding of Caraxian technology and its weaknesses. On the Defiance, the crew watched as the once perfect Caraxian formation dissolved into chaos. Sir, Hana called, 3 enemy ships have collided. 2 more are firing on their own allies due to the false targeting data. Lee nodded. Continue firing on their shield generators. Use the patterns we identified. The Defiance's weapons found their marks with surgical precision. One by one, Caraxian ships lost their shields. I don't understand, Park said, watching the tactical display. How did you know all this would work? Lee's eyes remained on the battle. Because I saw the pattern. The Caraxians built their entire military on the idea that their technological advantage made them invincible. They stopped innovating, stopped thinking creatively. He turned to Park. But humans never stop adapting. That's our strength. A massive explosion lit up space as another Caraxian ship's reactor went critical. "Sir," Kang reported, "the remaining Caraxian vessels are retreating. All except the flagship." Lee studied the image of Traz's ship, damaged but still dangerous. "They're hailing us," Hana said. Lee nodded. On screen, Admiral Traz appeared, his bridge filled with smoke and flickering lights. "How?" the Caraxian demanded, his composure finally broken. "How did you do this?" Lee stood straight, despite his exhaustion. "You thought the laws of space combat were fixed, Admiral. We just rewrote them." Traz's face hardened. "This isn't over, human. What one of you can create, our scientists can counter." "Probably," Lee agreed. "But by then we'll have created something new. That's what humans do." He signaled Hana to cut the transmission. "Sir," Park said quietly, "the Caraxian flagship is powering its main cannon. They're going to try to take us with them." Lee looked at his crew, tired, scared, but standing their ground. He thought of all the human ships and crews that had been lost over the past 6 months. "Target their reactor core," he ordered. "End this." The Defiance fired one last time. The Caraxian flagship exploded in a blinding flash, pieces of the once mighty vessel scattering across space. Silence fell over the bridge. Then slowly, cheers began to rise from the crew. Lee sat heavily in the captain's chair. "Send a message to Earth Command. Tell them." He paused, considering his words. "Tell them the rules have changed. And for the first time, they've changed, in our favor." As the Defiant set course for home, the stars seemed brighter somehow. The impossible had been done. One human pilot had changed the course of the war, and this was just the beginning. 1 month after the battle that changed everything, the UES Defiance docked at Earth's orbital station. Captain Lee Jun stood at the viewports, watching as Earth grew larger below them. After so long in deep space, the blue-green planet looked like something from a dream. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Park said, joining him. Lee nodded. "Never thought I'd see it again." The journey home had been surprisingly quiet. After the destruction of Admiral Traz's fleet, the Caraxians had pulled back their forces across all fronts. It was as if they were reassessing their entire approach to the war. "Captain," Hana called from further down the corridor, "Earth Command is waiting for you in the main conference room." Lee straightened his uniform. "How do I look?" "Like someone who just rewrote the laws of space combat," Park said with a smile. The conference room was filled with the highest-ranking officers in Earth's defense forces. Admiral Choi, the head of Earth Command, stood as Lee entered. "Captain Lee," Choi said, extending his hand. "The hero of the hour." Lee shook the Admiral's hand. "Just doing my job, sir." "Your job may have saved humanity," Choi replied. He gestured to the seats around the large table. "Please sit. We have much to discuss." Lee sat, noticing the mix of expressions on the faces around him. Some looked at him with clear admiration. Others seemed more cautious, even skeptical. "We've reviewed your reports," Choi began, "and analyzed the data you collected on Caraxian technology. What you discovered is revolutionary." "Thank you, sir." "However," Choi continued, "some of my colleagues have concerns about your methods." A stern-faced woman at the far end of the table spoke up. "You modified a military fighter with experimental technology without authorization, Captain. That's a serious violation of protocol." Lee met her gaze. "With all due respect, ma'am, we were losing the war. Sometimes protocol needs to take a back seat to survival." "Desperate times call for desperate measures," Choi said, smoothing over the tension. "And no one can argue with your results." He pressed a button, and a holographic display appeared above the table. "This is the current state of the war," Choi explained. The display showed the positions of human and Caraxian forces across known space. For the first time in months, the human territories weren't shrinking. "Since your discovery, we've implemented your tactics across our fleet," Choi said. "Every human ship now has the ability to exploit the weaknesses you identified in Caraxian technology." "And the results?" Lee asked. 7 major victories in the past 3 weeks, Choi replied with pride. We've reclaimed 3 star systems already. Lee felt a weight lift from his shoulders. It had worked, not just for the Defiance, but for all of humanity. But, Choi continued, his expression growing serious, we don't expect this advantage to last. The Coraxians are already adapting. That's why we've called you here. Sir? We're creating a new division within Earth Command, a team dedicated to developing new combat tactics and technologies. We want you to lead it. Lee blinked in surprise. Me? I'm just a ship captain. You're the man who saw a pattern no one else did, Choi corrected. The man who looked at an unbeatable enemy and found their weakness. The stern-faced woman spoke again, her tone softer now. We need that kind of thinking, Captain Lee. The kind that isn't limited by what we think is possible. Lee considered the offer. He loved commanding the Defiance, being out among the stars. But this was a chance to make a bigger difference. What about my crew? He asked. They'll be reassigned according to their skills, Choi answered, though we'd like to keep Commander Park and Lieutenant Kim as part of your new team. Their insights during the battle were invaluable. Lee nodded slowly. Then I accept. Excellent, Choi said with a smile. Now there's someone else who wants to meet you. The doors opened and a tall, thin man entered. His clothes were civilian, but his bearing suggested military background. Captain Lee, Choi said. This is Dr. Han, head of our Research and Development Division. Dr. Han approached Lee eagerly. Captain, it's an honor. Your use of quantum mechanics in combat was nothing short of brilliant. Thank you, Lee replied. Though I can't take all the credit. My ship's engineer installed the experimental drive. Ah. Yes, the micro-jump system, Dr. Han said, his eyes lighting up. A crude implementation, but effective. With proper development, we could refine it considerably. The scientist pulled up his own holographic display. I've been studying your maneuvers. The quantum echo effect you created was previously thought impossible outside a laboratory. The display showed a simulation of Lee's fighter, splitting into multiple ghost images as it darted between Coraxian ships. The math behind this is fascinating, Dr. Han continued. You essentially created a temporary state where your fighter existed in multiple probability states simultaneously. Lee nodded. I had a feeling that might be what was happening, though I was working more on instinct than theory. Instinct guided by genius, Dr. Han said admiringly. And it gives us a foundation to build on. Admiral Choi cleared his throat. Dr. Han will be working closely with your new division, Captain. Together, you'll develop the next generation of space combat tactics. The meeting continued for another hour, with plans being made and resources allocated. When it finally ended, Lee felt both exhausted and energized. As he left the conference room, he found Park and Hana waiting for him. So, Park asked, what's the verdict? We're being reassigned, Lee told them. All 3 of us. We're going to lead a new division focused on developing new combat techniques. Hana's eyes widened. Us? Really? Apparently we made quite an impression, Lee said with a small smile. What about the Defiance? Park asked. Lee's smile faded slightly. She'll get a new captain. A good one, I'm told. They walked together toward the observation deck, processing the news. It won't be the same, Hana said quietly. Not being on a ship together. No, Lee agreed. But what we'll be doing could save every ship in the fleet. They reached the observation deck and stood looking out at Earth below and the stars beyond. The Coraxians will adapt to what we did, Park said. They'll find ways to counter it. Of course they will, Lee replied. That's why we need to stay one step ahead. Keep changing the rules before they can catch up. A group of young cadets entered the observation deck. When they spotted Lee, they fell silent, staring at him with awe. Is that him? One whispered loudly. The pilot who took on 12 Coraxian ships? Lee felt uncomfortable under their stares. He wasn't used to being viewed as a hero. Park noticed his discomfort and grinned. Better get used to it, Captain. You're famous now. That's not why I did it, Lee said quietly. We know, Hana assured him. But people need heroes, especially now. They need to believe we can win this war. Lee turned back to the viewport, watching. as a fleet of Earth ships prepared to depart the station. Each one now carried the technology and tactics he had discovered. Each one now had a fighting chance. 1 month ago we were losing on every front, he said. Now we're taking back what we lost. And it all started with one crazy pilot, Park added, clapping him on the shoulder. Lee smiled. One crazy pilot, and a very good crew. As the Earth fleet began to move out, their engines glowing against the darkness of space, Lee felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The war was far from over. The Coraxians would adapt, regroup, and come back, stronger. But for the first time, humanity had shown they could do more than just survive. They could win. 6 months after Captain Lee Jun's historic battle, he stood in the simulation chamber of Earth's largest space academy. Around him, 30 young pilots watched with eager eyes as he prepared to demonstrate the maneuvers that had changed the course of the war. The quantum echo technique isn't just about technology, Lee explained. It's about thinking differently, about seeing patterns where others see only chaos. He stepped into the simulator pod, a more advanced version of a fighter cockpit. The yaw, canopy closed, and the system hummed to life. Watch carefully, his voice came through the speakers. What I'm about to show you is now the foundation of our new combat doctrine. On the large screens above, the students watched as Lee's virtual fighter executed a series of impossible maneuvers, splitting into multiple ghost images that flowed around enemy fire like water. In the control room overlooking the chamber, Park and Hana watched with pride. He makes it look easy, Park said. Hana nodded. That's because he never stops practicing. He's in the simulator every night refining the technique. Even though he doesn't fly missions anymore? Especially because he doesn't fly missions, Hana replied. He says if he's asking others to risk their lives with these maneuvers, he should be able to perform them perfectly himself. In the 6 months since their return to Earth, Lee's combat innovations had spread throughout the human fleet. The Division of Advanced Combat Tactics, now known simply as Lee's Division, had produced 3 new fighter designs and countless tactical improvements. The war had shifted dramatically in humanity's favor. The Coraxians, once seemingly invincible, were now on the defensive across all fronts. As Lee finished his demonstration and the simulator powered down, the students burst into applause. Questions? Lee asked, stepping out of the pod. A young cadet raised her hand. Sir, how did you know the quantum echo would work? The math behind it is incredibly complex. Lee smiled. I didn't know for certain. But sometimes when all conventional options are exhausted, you have to try the unconventional. Another cadet spoke up. Is it true the Coraxians have developed countermeasures against the echo technique? Lee's expression grew more serious. Yes, their newest ships have adaptive targeting systems that can track quantum echoes. That's why we never stop innovating. He gestured to the simulator. What I showed you today is already being improved upon. After the session ended and the cadets filed out, Dr. Han entered the chamber. Impressive as always, Captain, the scientist said. Though I notice you didn't show them your newest variations. Lee shrugged. Those aren't ready for teaching yet. The triple phase shift? Dr. Han raised an eyebrow. It worked perfectly in our last test. Perfect in a test isn't the same as reliable in combat, Lee replied. I won't teach techniques I wouldn't trust with my own life. The scientist nodded, respecting Lee's caution. Speaking of new developments, we've received some interesting intelligence. Admiral Choi wants to see you immediately. In Admiral Choi's office, a somber mood hung in the air. Park and Hana had joined them, along with several high-ranking military officials. We've intercepted Coraxian communications, Choi began without preamble. They're planning something big. He activated the holographic display, showing a massive Coraxian vessel unlike any they had seen before. This is the Dominance, Choi explained. A new class of warship, bigger than anything in their fleet, or ours. Lee studied the schematics. What are we looking at in terms of capabilities? Our analysts believe it has a new type of shield system, specifically designed to counter our targeting methods, and weapons that can track quantum echoes. Dr. Han leaned forward. They've been studying our techniques, adapting to them. Just as we expected they would, Lee said calmly. What's their target? Choi's expression darkened. Earth. They're planning to bring the dominance here, to strike at the heart of human space. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. How much time do we have? Lee asked. The dominance will enter our solar system in approximately 72 hours, Choi replied. We're mobilizing every ship we have, but against a vessel of that size. Lee examined the hologram more closely. There's always a pattern, always a weakness. He pointed to a section of the ship. What's this structure here? Dr. Han zoomed in on the area. It appears to be their quantum entanglement hub, much larger than on their previous vessels. Which means it's more important, Lee reasoned. They're doubling down on their strengths instead of addressing their weaknesses. A plan began to form in Lee's mind. I need to see this ship up close. Choi frowned. What are you suggesting, Captain? Let me take a small team in the new stealth scout we've been developing. We'll get close enough to gather detailed scans, then return with the data. That's extremely risky, Choi objected. If you're detected, then we'll use the quantum echo to escape, Lee said. The scout is equipped with the latest version of the system. After much debate, Choi reluctantly approved the mission. 24 hours later, Lee found himself back in a pilot seat, navigating the sleek new scout ship toward the approaching Caraxian fleet. Park sat beside him as co-pilot, with Hana handling communications and sensor readings. Just like old times, Park commented as they dropped out of faster-than-light travel at a safe distance from the Caraxian approach vector. Except now we're deliberately flying toward danger, not running from it, Hana added. Lee focused on the controls. Passive sensors only. Let's see what we can learn without getting too close. The Scout's advanced systems began collecting data on the massive Caraxian warship. Its size was staggering, nearly 3 times larger than Earth's biggest vessel. Look at the energy readings, Hana said. Their main weapon is drawing power like nothing I've ever seen. Lee studied the readouts. We need to get closer. I need to see their shield harmonics in action. He guided the Scout carefully closer to the dominance, staying in the sensor shadow of a nearby asteroid. There, Lee said suddenly. Look at that emission pattern from their quantum hub. Park and Hana both leaned forward to see what he had noticed. It's pulsing, Park observed. Not just pulsing, Lee said, excitement creeping into his voice. It's cycling through frequencies just like our new jammers do. Which means they're vulnerable during the transition between frequencies, Hana realized. Exactly, Lee confirmed. For just a fraction of a second, but that's all we need. Their moment of discovery was interrupted by an alarm. They've detected us, Hana reported, tension in her voice. 2 Caraxian fighters on an intercept course. Time to leave, Lee said, powering up the main engines. We have what we need. As the Scout turned to escape, the Caraxian fighters opened fire. Energy beams sliced through space around them. Engaging quantum echo, Lee announced, activating the system. The Scout seemingly split into multiple images, confusing the Caraxian targeting systems. But the enemy fighters adjusted quickly, their new systems tracking the real ship despite the echo effect. They've adapted, Park warned as a shot grazed their shields. Lee smiled. Then it's time for something they haven't seen yet. He activated the triple-phase shift he had been perfecting, a new variation of the quantum echo that added a temporal element. The Scout didn't just appear in multiple locations. It seemed to shift slightly in time as well. The Caraxian fighters lost track completely, their shots hitting nothing but empty space. Minutes later, the Scout jumped to faster than light speed, carrying its precious data back to Earth. When they returned, Lee immediately took the new information to Admiral Choi. And Dr. Han, we have a window of opportunity, Lee explained, showing them the data. A microsecond vulnerability during their shield frequency shifts. Dr. Han studied the readings with growing excitement. If we could exploit this with a precisely timed attack, we can, Lee assured him. But we need every ship we have, each attacking at exactly the right moment. 2 days later, as the Dominance entered Earth's solar system, it was met not by a disorganized defense but by a carefully choreographed dance of human warships. Lee, back aboard the Defiance as a special tactical advisor, watched as the plan unfolded. In perfect synchronization, human ships executed a complex series of maneuvers, each attacking during the precise moment of vulnerability in the Dominance's shields. Shot after shot penetrated the supposedly impenetrable defenses of the massive warship. "It's working," Park said in awe as the Dominance's shields began to fail completely. The tide had turned permanently. What had begun with one human pilot's desperate gamble had evolved into a new understanding of space combat, one that favored human creativity and adaptability over Caraxian technological superiority. As the Dominance retreated in flames, Lee watched the stars through the viewport. "This isn't the end," he said quietly. "No," Hana agreed. "But it is a new beginning. The rules had been rewritten, and humanity was writing the next chapter."